Hi there, it's the old professor again. I'd like to talk about Trump's universe. Yes, it's true. Trump once owned an actual university. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a fraud and a failure, as did his casinos. However, we must not confuse a university with a universe. Trump, having an unfamiliarity with science as well as with spelling, must have stumbled somehow across the concept of the parallel universes. Modern physicists have lately speculated that some may actually exist, and probably do, whereas the spec, facts and truths and realities were opposed to those existing in our known universe. Trump, noting that there appeared to be no admission charge and in his desperation may have decided to sign up for one. And as a source of enlightenment, I thought it would be interesting to examine the alternative facts and realities which reside in Trump's new world or universe. Let's begin by the numbers, enumerating some of the facts Trump's recent discoveries have with our old universe that we believe in today. Number one, let's start with COVID 19, could be mass murder. Trump's take: I saved hundreds of thousands of American lives by rapidly banning the Chinese and European travelers from coming to the United States. Well, the reality: Trump actually delayed warning Americans of the real and imminent danger posed by COVID 19 after being informed of it by one of his chief advisors. He admitted receiving this information in a taped interview with journalist Bob Woodward. uh, well, Woodward had interviewed him on tape, and Trump was saying that he purposely downplayed the information which could possibly have saved many lives in order to avoid creating a public panic which might seriously threaten his favorite claim to fame, the American economy. Ironically, his action or inaction led to initial dive in the stock market, and the loss of many jobs and lives. Former President Obama, a student of science, declared publicly in 2014, 2 years before leaving office, that we could be or would be facing an extremely life-threatening airborne virus epidemic. At that time, he had enacted and put in place a plan to provide for the PPD methods and materials to help deal with the expected arrival of the virus. Upon his arrival in 2017, Trump rapidly dismissed and abandoned Obama's preparation plan, insisting that its cost was unnecessary. Even after disaster struck, Trump continued to downplay COVID 19, insisting that it would soon disappear. He publicly encouraged social gatherings, especially at his rallies, downplayed wearing masks, social distancing, and COVID 19 testing. The inevitable result of this representable behavior: the United States, with 1/20th of the world's population, has, from the beginning to the present day, endured 1/4 of the infections and deaths attributed to the virus. Well, let's now go on to election fraud, the second. Trump's take: I was reelected by another landslide, but was cheated by fraud and corruption. Well, the reality, Trump initiated his political career by utilizing the big lie that Barack Obama was not really born in the United States and that therefore was legally ineligible to be president. He then proceeded with an unending stream of prevarications, distortions, and mistruths up to his last days as president, after which he persisted in claiming with hardly a shred of evidence that he had won the 2020 election by a landslide. The official electoral count, verified and validated by both houses of Congress, including the Senate with a majority of Republican members, had President-elect Joe Biden winning by a margin of 306 to 232. The popular vote count showed Biden winning by over 7 million votes. Strangely, in most of the states contested by Trump, the election committees were run and overseen by his own party. The Republicans were his own party. And even stranger, but not really, Trump never suspected an iota of fraud involved in any of the state races that he had lost in. But fellow Republicans had won. Notably, even Mitch McConnell, the Republican Senate leader, concurred that Joe Biden had won the election. At least 60 court judges, many appointed by Trump himself, had rejected his appeals that the election was fraudulent. Even Trump's 6-3 majority in the U.S. Supreme Court refused even to hear his appeal. In the aftermath of Trump's tenure of blames, lies, and distortions, apparently gave great encouragement to the angered mobs that stormed the Capitol building in January 6, threatening the lives of leaders, destroying property, and causing the deaths of some. Have a drink of water here. Of course, Trump's impeachment won't recover those lives. And of course, we must also acknowledge that others, officials in the Republican Party and the fake media, as well as Trump, were also complicit in encouraging the deplorable gullibles that succeeded in doing such things to our tottering economy. Polls indicate that even after storming of the Capitol, 75% of registered Republicans are still convinced that the election was stolen. What more can be said? Apparently, Trump isn't the only one trapped in that parallel universe where reason is banned and narcissism reigns. Going on to the third indication of his faultings, Trump's take. It's the economy. I transferred the faltering U.S. economy when I took office into the greatest and most successful of all time. But the reality, as Trump took office, he inherited a recovering and rising U.S. economy, the result of policies initiated under his predecessor, Barack Obama. Under Trump, initially job growth continued to rise, and the stock market bloomed. However, in an overall view, Trump's claim was essentially bogus. The stock market is not the only measure of an economy. Under Trump's policies, the financial gap between the wealthy and the middle class and the poor continued to widen. His trickle-down tax cuts benefited the rich by 90%. The top 5% of our citizens ended up owning 95% of all our collective wealth. Of course, in the end, Trump's balloon had to burst. And when the virus struck, and his desperate short-sighted attempts to save the economy led only to further disasters. Which takes us, whoops, are we lost on this thing? What happened? Yeah, this would take us to immigration, the wall. Trump's take. We'll build a great wall all along our southern border, and Mexico will pay for it. We should fashion our immigration policies to favor the richest, brightest, and talented rather than those from shithole countries. For the time, we should ban all Muslims from coming to our countries. Let's send the dreamers back, too. They should not be given the right to citizenship. Well, the reality here, yes, in some parallel universe, Mexico would gladly finance the wall, all 2,000 miles of the wall, characterizing caravans and hordes of Latin American thieves, rapists, and murderers streaming across our defenseless borders. They would certainly provide an excellent opportunity upon which any narcissistic demagogue might love to build a base. And what do these words on the Statue of Liberty say? Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuge of your teeming shore. If there is one fortunate item in today's news, it is now that President Biden is busy making an effort to reunite the thousands of children cruelly separated from their parents at the border under Trump's policies. What does our Constitution say about government and religion? Do we favor only our own? Shouldn't we have a path to citizenship as well? And what's the American dream all about? And now we go on to 5, the World Health Organization, the WHO. Trump's take. Trump maintained that he was punishing the World Health Organization for colluding with China by withholding information about the dangers posed by COVID-19 for at least a week. He felt that by withdrawing from membership in the WHO, we should also save the contribution fees which we could use for ourselves. Well, the reality here, actually it appears that Donald was really seeking scapegoats such as China and the World Health Organization to blame for the blame. Excuse me. Donald was really seeking scapegoats as China and the WHO to blame for the early rise of the COVID-19 virus, rather than face accepting his own responsibility. The Chinese and the HBO withheld warnings for about a week, whereas Trump, by his own admission, played down the dangers for months in a futile effort to spare the economy and the falling stock market. Trump continued to ignore the warnings from the HBO to wear masks, social distance, and tests, He left the other nations of the world to finance the WHO and attempt to contain the spread of the deadly virus on their own, when a coordinated effort was obviously necessary. Fortunately, we are now having a new president to put us back on track with the WHO and to help coordinate the effort to confine the virus. Let's go on now to the sixth episode of Trump's Troubles. It deals with racism. Is it possible to believe that we would elect a racist leader that refers to the African nations as shithole countries? A judge that should not be allowed to decide his own case because he is of Mexican descent, and one that paraded the false propaganda that President Obama was born in Kenya, that had the protesters at a rally in Charlottesville, South Carolina, which included a number of white supremacists and members of the Ku Klux Klan. They included fine people on both sides, according to Trump, as well as stating that he never heard of David Duke, former Grand Wizard and ardent supporter of Trump. It might also be noted that Trump has referred to Black Lives Matter as a racist slogan. It's pretty clear that only an obtuse narcissist could make the ridiculous statement that no one other than perhaps Lincoln has ever done more for black communities than I have. To allow any doubt about the issue, we might recall that when footballer Colin Kaepernick bent on his knees to protest racism, the president, Trump, apparently seizing the opportunity to extol his patriotism for all to see, publicly blamed and referred to Colin as a son of a bitch that should be fired. Kaepernick was fired and blackballed. Later, in the wake of George Floyd's event, NFL Commissioner Adam Silver was forced to apologize for all the NFL owners and Trump. Well, let's get on to the nuclear threat. Trump's take: if it weren't for me, we would really be at war today. He apparently believes that the personal relations in which he has maintained with foreign leaders, such as Kim, Putin, and Xi, has protected us from nuclear conflicts. The reality: Trump's abandonment of our nuclear weapons treaties with Iran and Russia has led to the increased development and expansion of atomic weaponry. Fortunately, new elected Biden has now resumed negotiations on atomic weapons with these countries. The last thing the world needs is a narcissistic leader wallowing around in a perceived parallel universe with his fingers on the button. Well, we go on to climate. Trump's take in Trump's universe: the present takes precedence over the future. Of course, that's where the voters are. Therefore, the economy must take precedence over the climate concerns. That climate stuff is mostly a hoax anyway, just something the scientists cooked up. The children would be just fine. They don't vote, do they? Well, the reality: in keeping with his America First propaganda, President Trump proudly proclaimed the United States, Trump proudly excluded the United States from the World Climate Accord, and its over 180 member countries pledged to do their part. Trump claims that the other countries weren't doing their share. The U.S. and China are the world's leading countries polluting the skies, however, and it might be noted that China has over 4 times the population that we have in the United States. it would be extremely difficult for Trump to find any member of the scientific community that would share his contention that climate pollution is any kind of a hoax. Okay, let's get to number 9, the swamp. Trump's take. Trump campaigned on the pledge that he would demolish the swamp in Washington, D.C. by replacing the do-nothings and thereby hiring the best and the brightest to be found to clean up the mess in Washington. Well, the reality, during her tenure in office, the list of those Trump picked to hire that left either fired or left, complaining he was just too inept or deranged to do the work. And they couldn't work with him, let's go over that again. Those that Trump picked to hire that were either fired or left complaining that he was just too inept or deranged to work with, which would be far too extensive to go into the list here. It was said that he himself was the only one that he would listen to. Trump would even publicly claim that he knew more than the generals, more than the scientists, more than his health authorities, and had proclaimed that he had the highest IQ ever when quizzed on a diagnostic test designed to measure mental stability. Well, let's have another drink of water. Well, let's take now exoneration, one of Trump's favorite claims. Trump's take. Trump maintained that he was totally exonerated of all charges after the Mueller report was released when his Attorney General Barr edited the public report. He claimed again total exoneration and innocence following the Senate's trial for impeachment. Trump again pleaded innocence of any encouragement of his followers that broke into the congressional building on January 6th, creating deaths and chaos, after which he was impeached for the second time by the House of Representatives. Well, let's get to the reality. In reality, in regard to the Mueller report, Mueller stated that he felt there was actual evidence that Trump may have been culpable in the Russian case, but he believed it was up to the Congress to decide to make an official opinion there. Well, Trump may have been culpable in the Russian case, but he believed it was up to decide the Congress to make that determination. In the Senate impeachment trial, rather than actual exoneration, it was purely political, with all the Republicans voting for innocence but one, and refusing for evidence to be presented. Problems here. Well. Perhaps the most devastating offense relates to attacks on the Capitol. To prevent the approval of Joe Biden as president. Trump had been complaining of fraud for 2.5 months since November 6th, the date of the election. The morning of that day, Trump and many of his followers managed to whip up a crowd outside the Capitol building into a frenzy, calling them to take back our country, stop Biden's approval, act now or never. They were even calling for the hanging of Trump's Vice President, Mike Pence. Trump implored the crowd to fight for justice and our country. He said he'd soon be out there with them, but later was said to be found hiding under his bed in the White House. Only when the damage had been done did he crawl out, telling the crowd that he loved them, that they could remember this day for the rest of their lives, and only then told his goons it was time to go back home. Thank you. You might find further information here if you check the website of ralphschroyer.com, the professor. Bye for now, and thank you.